Hi, good evening. Today is November 2nd, 2025, and it's 8:43 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my home located at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. And this is a house located at a neighborhood called Lake Point Estates. And that is very important for the conversation that for this demo. And for reference, this house is located in front of the house of a person called Joel Gray, who is the chief financial officer of Baxter International. And it's also located 300 feet away from Robert Mueller's house. And for people who are not familiar with the name, he is a former FBI director here in the US. So he was the FBI director at some point years ago. And both things are very relevant to this demo. So this demo, sometimes I give titles to the demos. So this demo is called. It has a long name, but the name, it's important. So I'll tell you the name. Sorry, just 1 second. The name is so long that I can't read it. 1 second. Yes. So then the demo is called the Joel Gray / Mueller's Modem / Andres Salvador, quote unquote, Mendez / Enrique Morales / the Great Wall Lodge / Advenir Apartments demo. I know it's a long name, right? It sounds crazy, but believe me, it's the name is important. Please give me the benefit of the doubt. So before I start talking about these entities, I want to recall something I mentioned in the previous demo that I recorded 2 days ago. That I made a comment saying that in these societal systems, it is harder to replace people at the top, right? And this comes from, this understanding, it comes from years of work that I've done on influence identification technologies that I've developed over the years on my company, Key Opinion Leaders, right? Which is what they stole. Right? That's what brought them to this point, stealing that technology. So, and I wanted to give you an example, right? Because in the previous demo I mentioned that, but I didn't really. I feel like I didn't make justice to the comment, right? It's a very important insight. The idea is, for example, and this I knew intuitively because I learned it in computing, in distributed computing systems, right? It's always harder so distributed computing systems, what they do really is funnel data through different layers of aggregation, right? It is always harder to replace a component in the aggregation funnel if the component is higher up in the funnel because of the dependency chain, right? Like if you mess up something, it could damage the entire funnel, right? But if it's something that is at the beginning of the funnel, even if you make a mistake, it's not that consequential, right? That's the idea. But in societal systems, right? So imagine that the network, imagine that you are controlling this network, right? And you want to move Robert Mueller from that house because of the situation and the discovery of the modem and the power line and all that, right? To move him to another place, you will have to move him to a place that has similar logistical and security conditions comparable to Lake Point Estates. And that's not easy to replicate, right? Because as I mentioned in the previous demo, right, like this is a neighborhood that was designed for this 25 years ago. And I'll give you more examples in this demo, but it seems like there's a lot of details that I didn't see before that hint of this deep design, right? And so, but in practical terms, like if you wanted to replicate a situation like this for him, like to move him, You would have to have a neighborhood of more or less the same size, right? We're talking about at least 100 acres of land, right? It cannot be anywhere. It has to be a place where he can still function effectively, right? Where he can um, project power in the social and political circles that he moves on, right? Uh, so it cannot be anywhere, right? So it has to be 100 acres in a very specific area. Also, it has to be surrounded by at least 5 churches, right? So you have to build the 5 churches, and it has to be surrounded by agents of the caliber of Joel Grade or Damon Sachs, right? Which are entities that have been developed over 25, 30 years, right? You cannot create a new Damon Sachs in a month, right? So that makes it impossible to move him, right? I mean, they can move him, but that would mean moving him to a place where the conditions are not the same, and that would make the situation vulnerable, right? Also, the other option is, well, maybe you don't move him, maybe you create another Robert Mueller, right? Like you get another one like him. That's not easy either, because how many former FBI directors can you find? I don't know, I don't have the data, right? I could do the research, but I'm guessing there's not many, right? And out of those, how many can you realistically recruit? And in a way that you can trust them, right? I don't think it's an easy, it's a situation. It's a situation that doesn't have an easy solution. So that's the reason why they can change this setup, right? Now I'm saying all this because the development of things, right, that led us to this point, um, it has to do with, you know, understanding of what happened, right? And why they made the choices they made in March and April 2025. At the time, I have to be honest, some of the decisions they made, I thought were a little bit irrational. But that was because they obscured the data and I could not see the reality, right? And uh, they kind of deceived me in a way, right? Like they not deceived me, but they misdirected me, right? And I'll give you more details what I know. But now that I found this booklet, the key of all this, right, unlocking this understanding was me finding that booklet with the real names of everybody at like one states, right? And when I see the names, I understand, right? Now I understand. Um, let's jump right into it, right? So what happened was, right, remember, my son was taken from the home on March 28, 2025. And at the time, right, I already had developed the pipelines and I had analytical tools. But what they did is that they changed the names in the registrations of most of the houses, right, at Lake Point Estates. And because of that, that misdirected me because they kind of, in a way, right, they tricked the pipeline, right? That's what happened. So of course, like for example, in the case of the house in front of me, right? What they did, they replaced the registration of the house by a name that looked like somebody from an Arab country, and they started bringing people to that house wearing turbans, and like the last in the few occasions that I saw, because in these houses you never see when you're if you're a target, you will see, if you realize that you're a target, you will probably see that you never see the faces of the people next to your house or to your apartment, right? And I've had the experience of living in apartments and in houses, and in both situations it's the same. Like you never see the neighbors because that's by design. Like they are designed that you never see their faces, so they can be replaced by different actors depending on the logistical needs that they have. So but in the few occasions that I saw people at that house, they brought people that seemed to be from an Arab country, right? Like men wearing turbans, and the women would have the veils, the face covers. Um, but there was all my misdirection, right? And they changed the name to a registration that seemed to be somebody from an Arab country, right? Now, and this is what, like it was a red flag to me, but I didn't really have a way to say it, right? But it never made sense to me that when I looked at this data in the pipeline, right, and I looked up these people, they never seemed to be super successful people, you know? Like, for example, to give you a concrete example, that Arab name, right, that they put in that registration, I looked it up and I couldn't find anybody that was obviously a successful person. What I mean by that is, these houses are like Point State, right? Like as I mentioned in the previous demo, the cheapest house in the entire neighborhood is this house, and it costed $1 million, right? So the prices go from 1 million to almost $4 million. So to be a person that is able to pay $3.5 million for a house, you have to have certain degree of success in your career, right? Like unless you won the lottery, right? That's the other option. But if you're a professional, a working professional, like if somebody does a Google search for your name, you should come up as somebody at least executive level, right? Or owner of a successful company. I guess another way to see that, right? That the least successful person in this neighborhood should be me, right? Because I have the cheapest house. But I looked up these names and nothing came up, right? So that was a red flag to me. Like the price and the level of the neighborhood didn't seem to match the level of success or public success or publicly viewable success of the names that were in the registration, right? So that I always had that in the back of my head, but I didn't have any way to prove, right, that those weren't the real names until I found the booklet. The reason I found the booklet, and I'm going to show you the booklet because people may think that I'm lying, right? So here's the booklet, right? Printed booklet. I don't know if you can see that there, right? Lake Point Estates, and this was printed. It doesn't say the imprint, but it says Lake Point Estates 281. It is a phone number 281-693-0708. So I'm not making this up. I have the physical booklet. And this booklet was given to me by Phil Denning when I moved in. He gave me a package with a bunch of forms to fill, like, I have a funny story about the form. I'll tell you about that later. So he gave me a package with a bunch of forms to fill, right, when you're moving in, and he included that booklet. And like this is a tremendous mistake because he has all the real names of all the people, right? Like those names that they change to trick the pipeline, all the names are here. Of course, when he gave me this, I had not captured the geo index yet. And he had no way to foresee the future and see what was going to happen, right? So, maybe it was an act of arrogance, right? Like, like I'm so confident that you will never figure this out that I will give you the booklet. But it also, I mean, it's such a mistake. It's such a big mistake, right? That it occurred to me that maybe the Venezuelan informant flipped him. I don't know, or his handler, right? Like because I don't know. Like it seems like a move that it could have been a move, right? By a level of intelligence that it's higher than what I can understand, right? Or he's just dumb, right? Like there's no other explanation. But anyhow, he gave me the booklet, right? And I see the names, and I see the name of the agent in front of my house, and he is Joel Gray, right? That's why he is the first person I mentioned in the title of the demo. Not because he's next to my house, but because something happened the day before my son was taken that involved his house. And I now believe that the taking of my son could have been a direct reaction to that event. So let me show you, right? I'll start by sharing my screen. So I have, and I posted this on YouTube already. So this is kind of my my list of talking points for this demo. So we're going to be working on this list a lot. But talking about Joel Gray, right? So this is what happened. I want to show you the video, and you can see that this video is timestamped. You see, this says March 27, 2025 at 8:18 p.m. And my son was taken on less than 12 hours after this video was taken. I'll play the video, but I'll tell you what it is, right? So I'll give you the backstory, because the backstory connects Joel Gray, I mean, his house, right? I cannot tell that he was physically present at that moment in the house, but at the very least, his house was used for this, right? Because his house is the only house that is in front of my house. There's no other possibilities here. Like, it has to be his house. And the angle in which the car was parked was pointing to the entrance of his house. Right? So what happened was, I'm going to give you the sequence, right? The sequence of events of how we got to this point on March 27th. So and many of these things are documented on the website, in the counterintelligence journal that I keep in spyhell.org/evidence. But I'll mention them here, right? The sequence of events that led to this point. So you can see the connection. So what happened was, around late February, I've noticed, using the cameras that I have installed, that every time my former partner left in the morning, she used to leave very early to drop off Sebas at the bus stop, right? So she would leave at 6 a.m. more or less. Every time, I started noticing this on the cameras, right? Every time she would go out in the morning from the garage, she would make a small stop just when the car left the garage, right? And at exactly the same time, a man from the house next door, 2310 Britton Ridge Drive, would always open their kitchen window, their kitchen door, and take out the trash every day, right? But exactly at the moment that she was coming out, and he would be holding a cell phone, right, in his hand every time, and it would be always a different man. Like, it wasn't the same man. Like, it was a different Chinese man every 3 days. Like, they would change the man every 3 days or so. So let me show you in the map what I mean. So I'm gonna go to see this house, right, which is 2302 Britton Ridge Drive. Right. So we were parking the black Tesla that she was and is still driving on this garage over here. Like, so the last garage, right? The one that is closer to 2310 Britton Ridge Drive, which is the Chinese house next door. That they set up the next day after I moved to this house. So that house was unoccupied. I moved to this house. The next day they moved it was the agent Bonner, but that's just a placeholder, right? Then they started bringing, Bonner was Russian. But then the next day after that, they started bringing the Chinese agents, right? And it's a rotation. Like, it's not an agent that lives there. It's like, this is like an office, basically, right? Like, they bring personnel on shifts, right? The shifts, I think, are three days. Every 3 days they rotate them, which is strange, right, for a suburban house. Like, if you see a house and then you see a different man every 3 days taking out the trash, right? Obviously this is not a real house, right? But anyhow, the kitchen of that house is more or less in this point, right, in this coordinate, and they have a door here, and this is a door that he would open, and he would come out, take the trash, but he was holding the phone at the exact moment that she was taking the car out, right? And this was every single morning. So I realized that what they were doing was using the Tesla as a relay point that would send data to his phone, right? And I put spectrometers and I verified this with hard data, right? Like, I'm not guessing. When I say spectrometers, maybe it's a bad translation, right? I don't mean, I think a spectrometer in English, I think it means really like a substance analyzer. I mean, and a spectrum analyzer is what I mean, right? In Spanish, we call them a spectrometer. But anyhow, so yeah, so when that happened, right, my reaction was, I said, well, I'm going to ban the Tesla from the garage, right? So I asked my former partner to please park the car outside in the driveway, right? And we started parking the car here at the at the very end of the drive. So, I mean at the entry, right? Like the very entry of the driveway. That was my counter action, right? So if the car is outside, the car cannot relay anything because of the distance and the you know and the obstructions from the trees and everything. The car cannot possibly reliably get data from the house, right? So that's what I did. So after I did that, uh, in March 11 or 10, I can't recall exactly the date, my former partner started. I mean, she didn't start. That came in early March. Early March, yes. But she planned a trip with the kids to a place called the Great Wolf Lodge, okay, which is it's kind of a water park in Webster, Texas. Okay, and you can see, right, the buffer zones that this thing has, right? So just by looking at the at the buffer zones, you can tell, right? But it also has other data points, right, that you can see. For example, if you look at the address, where is it? Yes, you see it has a 3 strike ramp. So this is a very important network point. And also, if you go to spyhell.org, and I want to tell you what I'm showing. Oh, what was it? Okay. Okay. So if I look it up here, right, you can see the amount of points that this thing has in Elon Musk join. Right? So this is an important, very important operational hub, right, of this clandestine network, right? So when she tells me that she's going to take the kids there, right? I mean, she told me that she was going to take the kids somewhere, but I didn't know exactly where. So that morning, which I think was, if I recall correctly, it was March 10th, but don't quote me that. Like the actual date is on the website. I asked her, right, like, where are you going to be? In case something happens, I have a way to contact you, right? And she gives me the address. The first thing I do is to look it up in the index, and I see this, right? I mean, there's points with 5 million points, right? I mean, this is a dangerous place, right? I mean, from my point of view, right? If I was an agent, this would be heaven, right? Because it would be safe haven. But for me, that I'm an adversary, this for me, I see this and I see risk to my life. Right? So I begged her not to take the kids there, but she refused. Right? She said, "No, I already planned for this. I already paid for it." And I said, "I'll pay for it. Let's book a different place, and I'll pay for." She refused, right? And she left. She left with the kids and with the black Tesla. At the time, right? I thought that because I was already submitting reports to the IRS and to authorities, right? I was trying to contact the authorities. So I thought at the time that maybe what the network was doing was trying to dismantle the equipment that they had in the car. But I was wrong, right? And I know that because the informant later confirmed that what they were doing was actually the opposite. They were putting more sophisticated equipment on the car. And all this is relevant because of what I'm going to tell you about Joel Gray, right? Or at least his house, right? The thing I'm going to tell you about Joel Gray is an observation that is factual about the interaction of the black Tesla with his house, and it's recorded in a video, right? Like this is physical evidence that it's impossible to dispute, right? Now, whether he was present in the house, or I don't know, but his property was used for this, right? And this led to the taking of my son. So, um, So right. Remember this thing with the Tesla being upgraded in terms of uh, espionage gear happened in early March. So maybe 17 days before this video was taken, right? And the reason why you see the car parking there is because I had banned the car already from the garage to avoid the car being used as a relay to extract data from the house. So I'm going to play the video for you. And this is a camera that it's a license plate reader. This is a special camera that is highly sensitive to infrared light to read the license plates better, right? But you will see that mounted on the base of the rear view mirror in that car in this video, there is a device that transmits pulsating infrared lights to the house of Joel Gray, right? And you know, if authorities ever come across this video, they can measure the angle, and you will see that this car is pointing in this video exactly to the entrance of his house, a little bit to the left of the entrance, right? Like it's not exactly the entrance; it's a little bit to the left. But that's where it was pointing, right? So I'm gonna play the video for you. So I don't know if you can see the pulsating light, right? Now I've done tons of experiments with this, with my other Tesla and with other Teslas, and no Tesla with this camera has this effect. I have not been able to find another Tesla where I can reproduce this pulsating light on this very camera, on this very same camera, right? So this is something special this car has. Or maybe it's something that all the cars have, but they enable it on demand. I don't know, right? But that would imply complicity from Tesla, right? If this is present in all the, I don't know. I cannot say that. But at least this car has this device. So this was on March 27th, right? So when this happened, I called my former partner to my office, right? And I show her the video, and I tell her, look what the car is doing. This is obviously a device that is transmitting data using infrared, right? And then she took the stance that she took was that I was accusing her, right? Like, you're accusing me now. You're saying that I'm a spy, right? I say I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is what I'm observing, that the car is transmitting this pulsating light to the house in front. And I asked her if she could, in the future, park the car facing the other direction, meaning facing my house, right? Facing the house, the garage. So the light wouldn't be transmitted to that house, right? I mean, the same. My proposition was, let's park the car in the exact same place where it is, but facing on the other direction, right? That will solve the problem. She said no. And the very next day, she left for the gym, supposedly, right? And that was the last time I saw my son. Like, she never came back that day. So that was the Friday 28th, March 28th. She left for the gym in the morning and with the child to take him to school, and they never came back. And after that, I could not see my son for 50 days. I could not even know where he was. Right? Of course, this sequence of events did not click on my head because I was under the impression that the house belonged to this strange name from, not a strange name, but like this unknown person with a name that sounded from an Arabic country, from an Arab country, but was not a prominent person in the internet. Like, there were no mentions about him, or nothing that could justify him owning a $3 million house, right? So I could not tie the dots, right? But now that I have the booklet and I see that this house belongs to Joel Gray, who is the chief. Oh, sorry. Yes. So the house belongs to Joel Gray, who is the chief financial officer of Baxter International. So this is a very prominent person, right? And this is why I was mentioning at the beginning that replacing a person at the top, or at the of a societal system that is hierarchical, is very difficult. So this is the reason why I say that probably, right? This video that I posted, the reason why my son was taken on March 28th, besides the fact that I, reported Diosdado Cabello to the IRS and all that, but the thing that really triggered it, right? Like the how do you say that in English? The hair that broke the camel's back in a way, right? Like the thing that tipped the balance in one direction was that I posted this video hours before. Why? Well, because Joel Gray is an individual that has, a career behind, like many people know him, right? I imagine if you're the chief financial officer of a company like Baxter, many people in the industry will know your name. And he cannot just disappear, right? And now I had physical evidence, this video, showing how this Tesla was transmitting infrared pulsating light to his house, right? So they had to take extreme action because the legal liability, and remember, this is a person that lives 300 feet away from Robert Mueller. So if I successfully contacted the authorities, right, if they could not force me into submission, and I contacted the FBI somehow, the FBI would see that Robert Mueller lives 300 feet away, and they would look into everybody, right? So they could not let that happen. So I think that's the reason why my son was taken, because I posted this video, right? Because I had this visible evidence of the car that had just came back from the Great Wall Flush or an upgrade there, now transmitting infrared signals to the house that belongs to Joel Gray. So I think that's the likely explanation, right? Right. So the other implicit connection here is with Andres Salvador, quote unquote, Mendez, right? Because, well, obviously, right, he was involved, probably, right? I would think that he was involved in the planning of installing that equipment at the Great Wall Flush. Like he had to be there. There's, it's unlikely that he wasn't involved, right? So if he was involved in installing the equipment that was then transmitting to the house of Joel Gray, he would be, in a way, collaborating with whoever was in that house, right? Operating that equipment. I mean, he installed the equipment in the car so he could communicate with the house. So, that would create that connection, right, implicitly. All right. So the second item I have in my list is, that question of, whether it's possible, right, that the informant flipped. I mean, this informant that is trying to make Diosdado Cabello's life difficult. And that's another thing I remember, right? Like during that time, when they installed this thing at the Great Wall Lodge, the main contention point with the network was that I had started developing the informants like a month ago or 2 months before that, right? Like informants that were actually passing me actionable information, right? And they were desperate to figure out who they were. And I remember that in one occasion, we were here in this kitchen, right? Me and my former partner. When we were having that conversation about the Chinese men, because there were multiple different men, but they were all Chinese, coming out at 6:15 a.m. when she was going out, right? With holding the phone to download data from the car. And she was like, when I explained to her what was happening, right? And I showed her the videos of the man coming out at the exact same time of her every single day, consistently, right? I told her, so her reaction was something like, she asked me, what do you want me to do, right? I can't be avoiding. I cannot tell when that person is going to come out of the house. Like I have no way of like avoiding that. Right? That was her response. So, trying to reason with her, I told her something along the lines of, listen, I've been developing informants, and both Chinese and Venezuelan, I have Chinese informants, right? Because, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but like, there's a lot of people that hate this network, right? Even within this network, like, because human dynamics, right? Some people feel like they were, and this is my interpretation, right? I don't know. Obviously I cannot have long conversations with them, but from what I gather, right, different reasons, right? Like they feel like they were passed over by people that were less competent or things. It's like power dynamics, basically, right? But anyhow, I told her, listen, they're trying to figure out who the informants are. And if they figure out who they are going to probably harm them. And we can't be responsible for that. That was my way to try to convince her to cooperate, right? To try to go the extra mile in avoiding the Chinese man. And to this day, I remember her answer to that. It was, um, she said, this is not what I signed up for. And that phrase sounded strange to me, because I didn't feel like it was like he was saying that to me, right? I told her, right, if the Chinese next door intercept the data and figure out who the Chinese informant is, they're gonna probably kill him, right? And her response was, I didn't sign up for this. I think she meant for the killing of the of the of the informant, right? But of course, I cannot, I can't tell, right? There's no way I can tell what she meant, right? Um, but it was just strange. Anyhow, so but the question in my mind is, whether, because this booklet, right, like this is like a nuclear weapon, like this is um like, how many years, let alone the money, right, but how many years of espionage work it took to put all these people in those positions. In, like, if you look at what they're at the real names, right, the people are in the key sectors that this network cares about. Like, there's people in construction, in oil and gas, in pharmacy, in food distribution, like uh, like this is the key areas, right? All of them. And Phil Denning gives me this booklet, right? So the question has to cross my mind whether there is design behind this from the Venezuelan informant that I know that is trying to, depose Diosdado, right? That's what he's trying to do. Maybe exploiting the situation a little bit, right? But anyhow, I guess time will tell. Now, there was a funny story with those forms. So the reason why I found the booklet is because as I'm coming back to this house, right, I'm setting up a second node. Now I have two nodes, and I have a way to turn the internet into an asynchronous internet, which I think, I'll make a technical session about this in the future. I think that's what the world needs to do. That could be a solution, right? Because right now, the internet and your phones, really, all devices are, most of them, synchronous, right? They're connected all the time. Like, for example, if you have your Gmail open in a tab in your browser, it's always sending messages to the servers of Gmail every 2 seconds, right? And this makes the communication predictable and synchronous, and makes it weak, right? Because the network knows when these events, they can predict when these events are going to happen in the future, and then they can plan for interception, right? So one solution that I found is I created kind of I'm not going to say created an internet, but I did a series of things that allowed me to transform my internet experience from a synchronous internet to an asynchronous internet, using a series of techniques that I put together, right? And that makes it impossible for them to intercept the requests. So now I have two nodes, and the two nodes work in tandem, right? Um, but so as I'm setting up this house, because the situation with all these people, right? I don't want to be in a situation, because I have the armored SUV that I never got the easy tag, so they could not track it, right? So I don't have a way to come into the subdivision if the guard is not there. And they have exploited this weakness multiple times in the last 5-6 months, right? So I was looking for the forms to fill the form again, to register the SUV to come in, right? To be able to come in without talking to the guard. or even if the guard is not there. So as I'm doing that, I found the booklet. Right? That's the only reason why I found the booklet. I wish I would have found it sooner, but it is what it is. So anyhow, that made me remember another incident that happened, and this should be somewhere, right? When Phil Denning sent me this booklet that I'm showing you here, right, along with the form, he sent me a form to register my name in the call box that is outside. And in the form, it said, and I think they modified the form to trick me into this, but I don't know. So the form said that if I wanted, I could choose a nickname for privacy reasons. Like if I didn't want to put my name in the call box, I could put a nickname, right? So, at that point, I thought that all the harassment and the surveillance was coming from Briscoe, from Internet Brands, and WebMD. So, as a joke, I put as names, I think I put last name Web, W-E-B, Mariana. So, the name of the fictitious or nickname wife, right, would be Mariana. And for my name, I picked Dick, right? So Web, Mariana, and Dick. So when it's abbreviated, it would read WebMD, right? So I did that, and then like a week after, right? I don't know if Lenny was harassing me with emails, and in one of those emails, he wrote a paragraph saying, and I also noticed, I'm quoting what he wrote. Like, I mean, the words might be, slightly different, but in essence, what he said was, I've noticed that you changed your name in the registration form to an alias, like implying like I'm a criminal, right? And then he said, "You surely seems like you're hiding from someone. I don't know who you're hiding from, but I'll figure it out." Something like that, right? But I mean, the form said that I could pick a nickname. I mean, but I'm saying that I think they changed the form because when I went to get a new form, because when I looked into this package, I had no more forms. I had exhausted the forms that they gave me a year ago. So I had to request a new form. And when they gave me that form didn't say you can pick a nickname. But the one that I had last year did say that. So I think they maybe gave me a slightly different form with that note, knowing that because I'm being harassed, I would put a different name, right? And then they would use that to say that I'm hiding from something, right? I don't know, just a data point. Um, um, yes. So now let's move on to the next item, which is the high power tension lines in Katy, Texas as a detection signal. So I have to say, I've been here for 10 years, right? And I don't know what is the setup in other places, right? So this might be hyper local to Katy or not, right? Like it would require somebody that has visibility into other, like physical visibility into other hubs of this network to see if this is a TTP or not, right? But the things I'm gonna say are specific to Katy. So in Katy, most of the electrical lines are subterranean. They go underground. You don't see electricity posts on the streets. Sorry, with wires. Like it's just don't see them, right? Because the wires are underground mostly, right? Except these special wires that go and pass next to the OPEC plus religious cellular towers. Those are the only wires that you see, but the rest are underground, right? But this is a mistake because this makes it so that it's visible where are the important houses, right? Like the important nodes. Because, well, wherever the cable goes, right? Like if everybody has the cable on the ground, but these houses have the cable on their backyards, well, that's the reason, right? Because now I think it is important for them that the cables are visible. I think the reason why, because they could have done the same thing with the cables on the ground. There's no practical reason why the cables have to be hanging from a post. I think that it's actually a TTP to be able to surveil the cables, right, from the back. That's why they put them on the backyards of the houses of important people that they control, right? So if there's anybody snooping around or trying to connect anything into those cables, they will be seen and reported. But if the cable was on the ground, you know, authorities could easily create a situation that looks like maintenance and actually intercept the equipment, right? So I think it's designed that way, right? That the cables are aerial, not on the ground. But because it's important for them that they can surveil the cables. But now the problem is that in combination with the data from the geoindex leads to trivial detection, right? So that's what I've been doing in the last few days. By the way, I don't know, right? I don't mean to overstep or anything, right? But if I may suggest, if any authorities come across these videos, one possible thing you could do is get from Tesla the location of my vehicle, because now I'm driving around on the Tesla, and the telemetry of that vehicle goes straight to Tesla, and you could track in real time my car. And wherever I go for a reason. Like I'm not a crazy person looking things around randomly. If I go to a place, it's because there's something important in that place, and I have data to back it up. I'm not gonna go to a place just to go on a fishing expedition, right? If I go there, it's because I have intentionality behind that action. Right? Uh, so anyhow, that's what I've been doing, right? Like tracing those cables for the last few days, and I found something interesting. And this could be nuclear. Let me show you. Well, before I show you that, let me show you this. If you go to the YouTube channel, right, which is at Rapid Fire Tips, after this was the day after I posted the demo, hypothesizing about that the modem of Robert Mueller could be buried underground in that concrete structure he has on the backyard. The very next day, a group of trucks came with flashing lights and everything, and they started excavating on the curb in front of the Cuban safe house next to the Valley Side house. Not exactly next; it's 2 houses away. I'll show you what it is in a second. And they dug that thing from the ground. So I don't know what that is, right? But it looks like a piece of concrete that was pre-built, and they took it from the ground and they took it away in that truck. So I don't know. It could be that the Cubans had another modem, right? But because this street doesn't have the aerial tension poles or power poles, utility poles, they had to put it on. They had to put it with the tension line on the ground and connect it there, right? It's possible. I don't know. But it was impressive that they took out that monstrosity from the ground in a matter of an hour. Right? Um, and this is the address of the Cuban safe house. That they've been supposedly remodeling that house for like 3 months. Of course, they're not. They're just doing that to have the excuse to have this rotation of cars coming in, right? To try to get the downlink and to see, to survey, right? But they're making that theater that they're remodeling the house. But it's a remodeling that is taking 4 months. It's like they're building the house again. Anyhow, that's the address, right? 10118. Oh no, sorry. This is the other house. So that's the other house where they parked the other truck. Let me show you the house I'm talking about. So they took it from this house. Well, from the middle of, so the Cuban safe house is this one, right? 10319 Lara Creek Drive. But the place where they took the thing from is in the middle of the 2 houses, and I'll show you the whole in a second. The other house is this 10315 Lara Creek Drive. Now, let me see if I can show you the where the hole is. Yes. Yes. So that's where they took the thing from. Right? You can see that it's in between the 2 houses, but it's more on the on the Cuban. It's more on the side. It's more in front of the Cuban safe house than it is closer to the Cuban safe house than to the other house. But that was also an important move, right, that they did. But this, I'm mentioning this not only because of the size of the work, right, but so this happened a day after I mentioned the hypothesis of the Robert Mueller's modem could be underground. And assume for a second, right? Like, I don't know, this would be something that authorities should determine, right? Like if that thing that they took out was one of those modems. But if that's the case, it would mean that Robert Mueller's house had the capability to communicating directly with the Cuban safe house next to my house. Right? So next to my other house in Valley Side Drive, right? So, I mean, if he's targeting me, right, on the two houses, I mean, but it gets even better than that. So following that power line, right, that goes. So remember that OPEC plus cellular tower, religious cellular tower, is located here, right, and you can see the distance. Like it's meters away from my house at Valley Side Drive and the Cuban safe house that I'm talking about, right. So that same power line goes straight to the apartments where they have my son, right, which is this. Oh, I had the name mistaken. It's not Advenir Apartments. It's Park Lane Fulshire Apartments. So I'll correct that in the. I don't know why I say Advenir. Maybe they changed the name. I think it was just. I don't know. It's a strange. I'll do. Okay, let's correct the name here in the invite. Okay. So, but the observation is that that power line comes straight, and you can see the poles here, right? It comes straight to these apartments, right? And this is so. What I'm saying is the point-to-point wire communication line that terminates in Robert Mueller's backyard goes straight to the apartment complex, which is controlled. It's a Docker hood controlled by the seven. Like, and I've said this multiple times before. But this dedicated communication line goes straight to the apartments where they keep my son, right? Which is controlled by the seven. So, of all the places in Katy that line could go to, it goes there, right? And I mean, I think that's, although it's circumstantial, right? Because I can't prove that he actually sent messages to that place, but it's highly suggestive, at the very least. I hope you agree with that, right? Now, another thing related to this is that some time ago, I programmed some workers on the pipeline to try to estimate where this Andres, quote unquote, Salvador Mendez could be located, right? And I did some analysis with the latitudes and longitudes, right? And I hypothesized two possible locations, one on the east of the apartments and one on the south. Now, on the east, there are no electricity poles of this kind, but on the south, there are. So my new hypothesis is that he was really on the south side, right? And I went there, I think it was yesterday. Like, so I'm talking about this neighborhood over here. So these electricity poles come straight from this apartment complex, the Park Lane Fulshire, and they come straight into this via this area, straight into this neighborhood, right? On the back of this house. So this tells you two things, right? One is that these houses that are next to the pole are important people. I mean, their job is to watch that pole, right? And some of them even have the modems. And I know that because that day, yesterday morning, I went there at 7 a.m. and they were already pouring cement in some of the houses on the back, right? So they were doing something with cement, which sounds to me like, either taking out or installing a modem, right? Moving a modem. And I'll show you a video of that. what that looks like. Let me see if I find it here. I guess this one. Yes, this one. Let me see if this would play here. I don't know. Yes, you can see that. Okay. So this was 7 a.m. on a Saturday, right? And the street was full with cars, people inside of the cars. You know, like this was obviously an operation. And like you can count there. So people inside, so there are at least 5 people in different vehicles, right? And nobody knew that I was going there, right? Like I didn't look it up in Google or anything. So they had this thing going on, and I found them because I was following the polls, right? And you can see the truck pouring cement, and this is an active truck. It's turned on. You can see the lights, and you can see the man working. And this is a Saturday at 7 a.m., right? So this seemed to me like an emergency move, given that the cat is out of the bag. That pun intended. That the modems are underground, right? So they're either moving the modem or taking it out. I don't know. And heavy surveillance in this area, right? Like all these people are really doing surveillance, right? All these people were in these cars inside waiting, and some of them were even women, like not even workers, right? Like that gray SUV was a woman. Like she was doing nothing. She was just standing there watching, right? But yeah, so this area is served by those special electricity poles that at the end connect to the same network that has the line that terminates at Robert Mueller's house. So my theory is that Salvador Mendez, from the 2 places that I identified before as likely candidates, I think this area is a more likely candidate because it has electricity poles. And that would explain, that because, I always found it strange, right, that given the level of exposure, they were not giving up on the communication, right? Obviously, it was obvious to me that they were still communicating, right? I mean, the Salvador Andres Mendez or whatever, right? And the reason is because they're using the cable, right? They didn't see risk of interception because they were using the cable, not the air, right? Not the NFC network that they have. They were using the more secure channel. And that's the reason why it's important that the child is in that apartment. Because it has the cable. It cannot be any apartment, right? Because in the past, I've told her, right, listen, I'll pay for your rent if you move out of that place. Just to get you out of there, I will pay for your rent. And she refuses, right? Because if it's another apartment, I may pick an apartment that will not have the cable, right? May not have the cable, right? And of course, I will pick one that is not marked in the index, or at least is marked with less points, which means that it's likely not going to have the cable, right? So I think that's the reason why they refuse to move to a different complex. But anyhow, let's keep going. Importantly, this cable also goes behind the HEB, right? Which is dangerous because that's a food. It's a food store, it's a grocery store, and I've seen firsthand how that can be dangerous, right? So if they have a secure medium to communicate without fear of interception to a grocery store, that thing is dangerous. But making a pause here, I think it's important to make the connection, right? That the taking of the child happened 12 hours after I posted that video about the Tesla transmitting infrared signals. And you can see the video. I'm not making this up. I mean, there's no other way to interpret that video. 12 hours later, the child is taken. And Robert Mueller, who lives 300 feet away from that home where the Tesla was transmitting to, has a direct cable connection, point to point, on a high tension line that goes straight to where the child is located, right? To where the child was moved when he was taken. I mean, what else do we need, right? So that connects, just to be super explicit about it. This connects Joel Gray's house and Robert Mueller, by extension, to where the child is located, right? And by extension, to everybody that was involved in making possible that the child was secreted there for 50 days, including the removal of the Tesla from my Tesla account, because that's the same card that they removed from my account using the secret TRO index number 7 that Morgan Heibner has hidden somewhere, right? And it also includes, in this group of people, Andres, quote unquote, Salvador Mendez, right? And the Great Wolf Lodge, where the infrared equipment was installed. So it's a nuclear set, as you can see. Right. So this is a good segue to talk about the next point, which is something that the legal vaccine flagged, because it got flagged first by the AMP pipeline, the anti-manipulation pipeline. So the thing that was flagged was that in a series of conversations with my former partner, and I'm really sorry to keep bringing the former partner, but I mean, to offer these data points, I have to mention it. But I don't want to make this something personal, right? Like I'm just relaying information that I witnessed, right? So the AMP pipeline flagged a series of conversations in which my former partner, these have been verbal conversations that are recorded, and also text messages. And by the way, I also want to say to authorities that in the same way that I invite you to intercept or get the data, the telemetry data of my car to see what I drive, I also invite you to see my text messages. If you can intercept my phone, you will see all my text messages, right? And I have 2 cell phones on Google Fi, and now I have a new one on T-Mobile that for some reason is not working. But different topic. So the conversations always are, right, when we're talking about the visits of the child, right? She makes certain comments, and the comments are in Spanish, but if I translate them, and I'm trying to translate them as accurately as I can, they are something like, she would say things like, we have a schedule, or I am following the schedule, right? Like things of that nature, which is odd because we don't have a schedule. Like in the September 11 verbal orders, the judge in the docket entry doesn't say what the schedule is, and the orders have not been signed. So I don't know where she's getting that schedule from, right? Now, co-clustered with this, the pipeline also brought up a series of conversations in which she discusses with me the work schedule of Sebas, right? Or other son, right? And she goes over the work schedule, and she says that she's going to bring Marcelo to visit when the other son is working. Okay. So if you look at it, right, it seems like when she says we have a schedule, she is referring to the work schedule of the other child. I mean, the schedule of the visitation that has been derived by the work schedule of the other child, which is odd because one thing should not dictate the other. But that's what I would think, right? But now, and this is where it gets interesting, right? So that's what the AMP pipeline flagged, and I put that into the legal vaccine. And the legal vaccine flagged that in one of the unofficial transcripts that I have, Judge Telfair recited sort of a visitation schedule, but he did it super fast. It was like in 7 seconds. Like he just said it so fast, I could not understand it, even what dates but he said something in one of the hearings, but this, I think it wasn't in the verbal rendering. It was in the September 8th hearing, right? When we were negotiating things and I was under duress because they had a pending psychiatric evaluation, quote unquote, threat pending over my head. But he said something on the record about certain days of the week, and so the legal vaccine flags that when she says we have a schedule and I'm following it, she might be trying to legitimize the missing index number 7 TRO. In short, the hypothesis is that maybe George Richard Bell, if he signed that TRO that Morgan Heibner proposed and then hid from everybody, even from the docket, which is not in the docket, maybe in that TRO, there are certain dates of the week in which they're supposed to be visits, right? And then by me following those dates under the assumption that she's talking about the work schedule of the other child, I am in a way legitimizing or acknowledging that I know about that, but that's not true. Any schedule that I have agreed on with her is because of the work schedule of the other child, not because I'm aware of anything that came from a judge. Nobody has served me any document signed by a judge, right? And it's not, you don't have to trust my word on that. You just have to look at the docket and see that the index number 7 is missing, right? Why is that document missing? Exactly, specifically that document. Of all the documents, that's the document that was missing, right? So, but this is it has deep implications, right? Because, well, for multiple reasons. First of all, if that thing that Judge Telfer said in one of the hearings on the record about the specific days of visit coincides with the secret TRO that Morgan Heibner is hiding somewhere, how did that judge came into knowledge of that schedule if that is not in the docket, right? It would mean that he had access to the document outside of the docket, right? And it would imply collaboration, right, to achieve a goal. Also, it implies, if this is the case, it implies complicity of the two employers of the other child. Because what a coincidence that they set up his work schedule to coincide with something that Judge Bell said on April 11th that nobody knows he said or signed, because the document is not in the document, right? So how is it possible that he has two different employers? How is it possible that two different employers set up a schedule that would make me follow this visitation schedule, thinking that I'm helping the other child? And it happens to coincide with what Judge Richard Bell signed, that Morgan Heibner then secreted and didn't give it to anybody, supposedly not even to the clerk, because his index number 7 is missing, right? So it would imply collaboration from those employers, right? Or at least the only other option is that they were tricked into setting those work schedules. But that's hard to believe because they control the schedule. I mean, how can somebody else external make them do anything, right? Now, these two employers are interesting because one of the employers is Main Event, which is a company heavily under the control of the 7, right? To the point that the daughter of what's his name? Daniel Parra works there or used to work there. I don't know, right? Like I've know several kids of important agents that worked at Main Event. And I said this in another, I think I put it in the book, right? Like this makes sense because, if the kids have to work somewhere for the important agents, right? It has to be an environment that is controlled because otherwise the kids could be tricked by the FBI, right? Or could be, it has to be an environment that is heavily controlled. And in a situation of high risk, especially in a situation of high risk like the one that they are in right now, right? the supervisors that are on the shifts where the other child works have to be, deeply in it, right, with deep knowledge of the situation, because they have to be very careful with who approaches that child, right, in one of those events. So that's one of the employers. The other one is Code Ninjas, which is an academy that teaches coding. So I don't know, right? It could be it's a franchise, I think. So it could be the owner of that specific location, right? I don't know. I don't know the extent of involvement, but if again, all this is hypothetical in the event that schedule, the work schedule of the kid, in the two places coincides with what Judge Richard Bell signed on this secret TRO Index 7 that is missing. If that is the case, um, in fact, let's check that it is still missing, right? Because the other thing that I'm thinking that they will do, that they will put it back, right? At some point, they have to. So when they decide to put it back, is going to be another important data point. So let's look it up here. For band. Yeah, it's still missing. See, so it goes from index number 6, then index number 5, index number 6. There's no index number 7 anywhere. The judge supposedly signed after the corrections were made, but the index number 7 is missing. And then it jumps to index number 8, right? So it's still missing. And today is November 2nd, 2025, and it's 9:55 p.m. Central Time. So yes, but in short, right? So the flagging here is that my former partner makes the point of saying that we have a schedule and that we're following the schedule. But I'm thinking that it's the schedule of the work of the other child, because nobody has given me any schedule. I mean, nobody has even told me that from the September 11th thing, right? From the April 11th thing. That document is missing from the docket. Supposedly, nobody knows what that document says. And what Morgan Heibner served me was not really a temporary restraining order. It was it's the scheduling of a hearing for a temporary restraining order, for the temporary orders, right? So she mistitled the document to make that appear in the docket, but that wasn't really an order. So it's a mystery at this point. What is that the judge signed, right? But the interesting thing is that Judge Telfair is reciting a schedule in one of these hearings on the record, and that was never discussed in the hearing. Like, there was no point in the hearing in which there was any discussion about when is that the visitations would take place. So the hypothesis is that by him reciting the schedule, if that schedule coincides with what is in this secret TRO, he would be legitimizing what it says, like what happened before, right? Like, it's like he's confirming the schedule. Like, it looks that way. Like, it would look like that way if somebody comes digging and doing an audit of what happened here, right? But I have to tell you that it's not true. Nobody served me with a document, and the document is missing from the index, right? The document is missing from the docket. There is no index number 7. So how is the Judge Telfair knew that schedule, right? That's a question that needs to be asked. And somebody needs to find this missing document index 7. Now, speaking of this, I have to tell you, the Venezuelan informant told me that it's very possible. I mean, he told me that it was the case, but he wasn't 100% sure. But from the information he got, that Morgan Heimner gave a copy of that document to the British prep school, which would make sense, right? Like, if they're trying to set up a trap in which they try to create a situation saying that I was in contempt of court, right? I think that was the trap that they were trying to set up, right? To put me in prison for a few days, to discredit, right? Sorry. She has to have given that document to the British preschool, right? To them be able to say, because so the trap is the following, right? She gives the TRO to the preschool, and then one day, if my former partner tells me go pick up the child, right, or if I go to pick up the child at the preschool, then they would say, there's a temporary restraining order saying that you cannot pick up the child from the school, and you went and pick him up, right? Immediately contempt of court and prison, right? But it's a trap, right? They never told me because they never served me with a document. That's why the document is missing from the document. So it's a trap, really. Um, but for that to be actionable, the British prep school needs to have a copy, right, of the document, because they will be called to testify whether I picked up the child, defying the orders, right? So it's possible that she gave a copy to that. So at this point, there's two venues in which authorities could potentially get a copy of that document by subpoena, issuing a subpoena to Tesla to see how is that they remove my car from my account, the black Tesla from my account, which is this IR pulsating car, right? That is was sending signals on March 27 to Joel Gray's house, or also asking the British prep school, right, to produce the document that Morgan Heimler probably gave them to set up the trap, right? So I guess, there's two possible ways. Also, I have to say, I kind of mentioned before, it's kind of an offer I want to make, right? If any of my informants is watching this, I'm putting out a reward. If anybody can get me a copy, a certified copy, stamped, of the secret Index 7 document that Morgan Heimler is hiding, I offer to, how do I put this? I imagine, right? Like, in every war, whoever loses the war pays for the war, right? I imagine that if I succeed, I'm going to be able to recover money from them. So whatever I recover, I will give you 1% if you give me that document. I think that's, I don't know, right? I'm not doing this for money, but I imagine I will get them, right? And if I do, I will give you 1% if you give me a copy, if you find me a copy of that document. Anyhow, let's keep going. Okay. So we talked about the mysterious pouring of cement on the backyards that are close to the electricity poles that pass by the OPEC Plus religious antennas. We already talked about that. And here are two specific examples. 49, so these are the ones of that video that I showed you with the truck, right? 4914 Cancun Hills Court, Full Shear, Texas 77441. And the house next door, which is the financial node, 4910 Cancun Hills Court, Full Shear, Texas 77441. And this was on Saturday, November 1st, 2025 at 7 a.m. And the video, which I already uploaded to Google Drive, Google Cloud Storage folder, has the name VID 20251101 _ 080412.mp4. Okay. Next, this note is that I was uploading the Call Mobile videos from 2024 to a Google Photos account, but I changed my mind. It's too slow. So I'm uploading them to a bucket, which I've called. Let me share the bucket with you. Is this? Oh, I'm talking about that missing index 7. The Venezuelan informant told me that, and I don't know if this is true, right? But he told me that that document, it's kind of also like a kind of get out of jail free card, right? Like, you know, like, I mean, and this is apparently, right, what the network is anticipating, right? If Morgenheimer gets in trouble, she could offer authorities to produce the document in exchange for immunity or for, you know. So um, they are mindful, I think is the word, right? The network is mindful that the people that have knowledge of where the document is could give it away, right? So the network is treating this document with extreme care. Like they are watching, right? The people that have knowledge of the document. They are surveilling their own agents to make sure they don't take the document and go run, right? So that gives you an idea of the level of panic that they have with that document. Right. So the bucket name is this one on the URL. It's call dash mobile dash or call mobile or mobile dash 2024. So here I'm putting the videos from the last year that recorded, like the raw videos without the annotations. Like the annotations I will give to authorities apart, right? When I get a chance to talk to them. Let's keep going. Okay. Okay. So I have a bunch of um, so in the previous video, I talked about this new framework that the network is testing, and the idea was to try to trick my system, right? Like by disguising the W's as an M in some of the diagrams, so to see if it, if it didn't. And they created a new framework based, I believe, on sets theory. By looking at the sets that they created, it seems to me like they could be represented by a framework based on set theory. And all this is explained in the previous demo. So here, I wanted to give you an example. Like most of these cars, I think, are at least, yes, like there's a lot of cars from October 21st, and you can see, like, here you can see how much of an statistical anomaly this is, right? Like all these vehicles in my path, all of them having plates starting with WMW, right? I mean, this doesn't happen organically in nature, right? And like I have even the videos of the faces of the agents, right? There was one that panicked, and I think this is a TTP, right? When he saw that I was, behind him, he panicked, and then he got stopped in a gas station and got got out of the car running and went into the restroom, like as faking as if he was having a restroom emergency, like he was rushing to get to the restroom, right? So I think that's a TTP, like explaining the odd behavior with the car as, I'm just distracted because I need to get to a restroom fast, right? But what I did, I parked in front of him, and I have this huge camera on the back, right? And eventually, he had to come out of the bathroom, right, of the restroom, and get back into his car, and so he got recorded with full detail by the camera. It was funny, but anyhow, here you will see. I'm going to read them out loud just so they're recorded in the video. So all these are Texas plates, okay? WVW9495, MMM2650, WMW1153, WMW7228, WMW4569, WMW0996. This is the guy that went to the restroom, right? WMN9872, RCV as in Victor 0308, MMW6161. Yeah, the HP plates. So this is kind of anecdotal. I'm not sure about this, right? But and this might be only true in Texas, right? So this is not universal, but I'll say it anyways. So in Texas, and I know this because I tried once to register a plate with this bigram years ago, and I couldn't. Apparently, the bigram HP, as in horsepower, is a forbidden word in Texas license plates. They don't allow to register a vanity plate with that. This was true at least 4 years ago, right? When I tried to do it wouldn't go through. It would tell you, you're using a combination of letters that it's forbidden. And I think it was because HP, is the abbreviation of horsepower, and they don't want people to put things on the license plate that imply that they can like trigger or encourage unsafe drive, right? Like let's race the cars. So I think, I'm speculating. I don't know the reasoning, but if you try to register a plate with HP, it doesn't work. Now, the interesting thing is that there seem to be vanity plates out there that have HP. Now, so I don't know, it could be that they've removed that rule, right? That's no longer an issue and you can't register those now. Or it could be that these people have a higher level of access to the DPS and they can register these plates, but nobody else can, right? Which would mean collusion. Or the other option is that the plates are fake, right? So that's why I mentioned it, because if you see a car with a vanity plate that has HP, check if the plate is real. Right. So the next point I have, right, is about a question I asked in the previous demo, in which I asked, I was talking about the 10 counter, and I proposed a hypothetical question, right, which was, well, if Mueller, when he came riding his bike to intercept me at the entrance, to increase the 10 counter, if he knew that that action would increase the 10 counter, and he knew how important he is in the network, and he knew that the importance is a factor to determine the next action, right? If increasing the 10 counter by passing next to me intentionally with his bike increases the 10 counter to a point that the network decides to eliminate it, right? He would be putting my life in danger, right? By passing next to me, right? Although the act of driving a bike, I guess the question is, the act of driving a bike is an act that is completely legal, right? In today's societal and legal frameworks. But if you know that by driving the bike in a certain way or in a certain path at a certain time, you would be effectively putting a target on somebody's back, and that person could be killed. Are you responsible? Right? That was the question. And when I thought about that, it was an obvious question to ask because how important he is, right? He's so important that maybe even if the 10 counter is at 0, just by him passing one time next to me to increase the 10 counter would be enough to get me in harm's way, right? To put it in some way. But I think, thinking about this a little bit more, this is a more general question. It's not really about how powerful the person is, right? And I'm saying this when I'm reading these plates. You see, like all these people, although they are lower level agents, like none of them is Robert Mueller, right? By any means. And they're just following me to mark my location as I go to the federal court. All this happened. All these people were following me. On that day, October 21st, I was going to the federal court to file an important document, right? So this is not that they're following me to see what I'm doing. They are following me to get in the way of me interacting with the federal court, right? But it's the same question, right? Although none of these people are doing anything that is illegal by current legal standards or societal rules, right? It's the same question. Like if one of these agents say that it's a 7 agent, right? And that person is knowingly using this app and informing this app of my location. And that act ultimately results in me being harmed. Although he's not pulling the trigger or not really, it's not the person doing directly the harm. He participated. Like that, his actions were a fundamental part on that result, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's obvious that although their actions are legal, with the current legal frameworks, they are harmful. They could be harmful. They could be lethal. I mean, this is more dangerous than pointing somebody with a gun. Why? Because, well, if you point somebody with one gun, the person can at least run, can hide, can try to fight back, right? Because it's only one gun. But what they're really doing is pointing at somebody with an entire network of agents. It's a distributed attack. It's multiple people, right? You can't run from this. This is way more dangerous than a gun, is what I'm saying. And it's obvious that the legal frameworks that we have are too far behind. Like, they were not designed thinking of this kind of threats to individual freedoms and even life, right? So that's, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the question I posed about Robert Mueller in his bike is really a more general question that applies even to these ground agents. Right? Because what they're doing by driving next to my car for a few seconds is the same. Right? They're putting a target on my back and informing the app where is the target, where is that target located in the world, so they can action against me, right? Uh, okay, moving on. October 30. So this was after I posted the demo hypothesizing about the location of the modem of Robert Mueller. The next day, on October 30, at 10:12, there were two moving trucks at the Wallace residence, which is next to Damon Sachs, which I think is really the same compound of Mueller. Like, it's, all those houses are working in tandem, right? And that house is important because that Wallace house is the one that has the antenna, the uplink, which is another interesting topic. But right, so they had two trucks in there, moving, right, moving things, moving furniture, which, but I think it was really a misdirection. The reason I say that is because whatever they move, either in or out, the antenna is still there, right? And we all know how important that antenna is. And whatever it is that they move, people or furniture, whatever they move, if the antenna is not moving, it's because the setup is not moving, right? So if they change the actor, it doesn't matter, but the setup is the same. And this has to do with what I said at the beginning. At these levels, high levels in societal systems, it's very hard to make a change. So it's not something. Just one second. I got installed. Okay. Sorry about that. I was getting another. One of the tabs was sound, had sound, and I couldn't figure out which one it was. But let me reopen here. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about the moving trucks. There was two moving trucks. Okay, and the license plates of those trucks were both Texas plates, Delta Sam Papa 4972 and Whiskey R as in Robert, F as in Frank, 8466. Also, the same morning, just the exact same time, a crew of cleaning ladies they looked Venezuelan. I heard them speaking and they seemed to be Venezuelan. from a company called Marvella's Cleaning showed up at the Chinese safe house 2618 Britton Ridge Drive, which is the Chinese safe house on the other side, not the one I showed you before, but the other side. Now, this is strange because I have footage of that house 24/7, right? Because I have the cameras in the mailbox for almost a year, right? And I never saw cleaning ladies coming into that house. But now, yesterday or that day, on October 30, they were bringing cleaning ladies, right? Maybe to extract something, I don't know. And I've seen this pattern before, right? Like the Seven has these cleaning ladies companies that their job is to get things from houses when they're in trouble, right? So it's a well-known thing. Okay, the cleaning ladies were Marvella's Cleaning, and the license plate was SYC, as in Charlie, 5084. And it was a hatchback, if I recall. Yeah, a Nissan hatchback, if I recall correctly. Now, the next item I have is about another case in the Fort Bend County Courts, family courts. And this is the case, the docket number is 13 DCV 210878. And this is the divorce between my former partner and Salvador Mendez, who I believe is really Andres Mendez. Could be Andres Salvador Mendez, I don't know. But this could be nuclear, okay? Because, you know, and I have the photos of Salvador and everything, right? But, you know, it would be nuclear because there could be official record of his face. So I found a document in which, so this is what happened, right? In 2021, after Marcelo was born in 2020, right? My former partner started with a thing that she wanted to get a passport for the child. And, you know, I didn't make much of it. It's natural, right? If you're a parent, you want to have the child to have a passport. But I didn't really understand the thing because in the situation I was in, which I was being harassed by Briscoe and WebMD, and they were stealing everything I worked on, I couldn't travel anywhere, right? Because if I left the house alone for a few days, they would, you know, they would move into the house, right? So, but anyhow, she wanted to get the passport, and you know, she did. And at the same time, she started with the thing that she wanted to get the passport for Sebas, right? And it was a difficult situation because supposedly Salvador Mendez was crazy in Venezuela, right? In a situation, in deplorable conditions. And it was challenging to get a passport because his signature was needed, right? So she filed an application with the court pro se. Like, she didn't go to Morgan Heibner for this, right? Which is strange on itself. But she filed an application pro se to modify the parent-child relationship. And she told me that she talked to a judge, and the judge explained to her how to do it. Which is also strange because, according to Judge Telfair, judges cannot give advice to proselytes. But anyhow, she got the advice. And what I was told at that time is that Salvador Mendez sent via FedEx an affidavit agreeing to the modification of the parent-child relationship to allow her to get the passport. That's what was presented to me. But as it turns out, I found this document, which is here, and it's signed, right, by the county clerk and everything. It's dated December 29, 2021. And I looked at the docket, and what the docket says is different than what I was told. So the docket says this. I'm going to read it to you. The docket says, and this entry is from December 28, 2021. The judge docket entry says, agreed, and I copied this verbatim from the website of the court, right? The same website I showed you before. It says, agreed modification, order signed, KLM. And this is important, it says on 12/29 that 2 notices were mailed according to Rule 306A3, index number 21 and index number 22. I assume these were 1 notice for each parent. But this is strange because Salvador Mendez supposedly is in Venezuela, crazy, right? I don't think that a Fort Bend County court would mail something to Venezuela. Like, it's impossible. First of all, the postal system of the US and the Venezuelan postal system are not connected. That's why he had to FedEx, supposedly, um, the affidavit, right? That's what they told me, that the affidavit was FedEx. If he had sent the document via regular postal mail, it would have never arrived, right? Or if it arrived, it would be 6 months from now, from the day that he sent it, right? So I don't think that the Fort Bend County court would mail a document via regular mail to Venezuela, right? But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do that. I don't know. But so that's one thing that is strange, right? That the notice was sent to the 2 parents. But there's also another docket entry days before that from December 14, 2021, in which says, and this is the important part, parties appeared pro se via Zoom and stated. This implies verbally, right? Because if they are appearing and they are stating, so this wasn't sent via an affidavit via FedEx. This was a verbal statement he made on a Zoom meeting. It stated that an agreement was reached with regards to Modem. I made a mistake here. To mother having the exclusive right to apply for and maintain the child's passport. Agreed. And it's signed by Judicial Officer Morgan, Cali. So this is interesting for multiple reasons. Well, first of all, it kind of, debunks the thing about the affidavit sent via FedEx, but also more importantly, because there was a Zoom meeting where his face was recorded when he made this statement. And these must be recorded in Zoom servers. And the retention period for, from what I understand, for court proceedings in Zoom is more than 7 years or 7 years, right? And this was only 4 years ago. So this meeting has to be recorded in Zoom servers, and his face would be visible in that Zoom meeting, right? So, it's probably trivial for the authorities to solve the mystery of, and this is something that is in a court record. Like, this is, I don't think I would have to lay predicate even to get this admitted, right, in court. Because this is already a court record. So it could be, it could be nuclear, right? Because they're obviously going through great lengths to hide the face of Andres Mendez, right? But now now we know that it's in that Zoom meeting of December 14, 2021. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about a bit of technical topics. Okay, I'm going to talk about the location of the Xfinity tab on this new node that I'm bringing up here at Lake Point Estates. So 2302 return bridge. Right. So the situation, it's the same game, but different rules, right? So the situation here is a bit different than at Valisai. In Valisai, actually, let's start there better, so you can see the difference, right? So at the Valisai property, the situation is a bit different because the house is here, and the tab, the aggregator, is on this house over here. So this is one of the tabs. This is the one that I was using before. Andres Pirella moved the cable to the other tab on the other side. But you see, there's at least 3 houses, right, of separation, and I don't have even line of sight to that tab, right? So I cannot even put a camera to watch it, right? And then Andres Pirella helped me move. So Penelope Suarez's son helped me move it to this other tab over here. I think it's here. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's on this house. It's somewhere around here in this corner. If it's not in this house, it's in this house. I always have trouble remembering. Could be here. I think it's here. But anyhow, this is even worse, right? So this is 4 houses away. Yes, 4 houses, right? And I have less view. So but it's pointless really, because they could. It's hard to see what they're doing with the tap, even if you have the tap in front of you, right? It's a cable that goes on the ground. They could be intercepting it a mile away, right? But anyhow, the new situation is a bit different, right? So in this other house, which is 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, the tap is located at the Chinese house next to my house. Sorry, what is it? Okay. Yeah, so 2302 is this one, right? So this is my house. And the tap is located on the front yard this time, right? So it's visible from the street, from the Britton Ridge Drive. And it's located exactly here. It's this thing over here, right? You cannot really see it, but it's here. But it's visible from the Britton Ridge Drive street, and from the sky. I'm mentioning this because knowing them, right? They can't help themselves. They probably already took the connection. I'm okay with that. I'm using it for things that are not things that are going to make public anyways, right? So yeah, if they intercept it, doesn't matter. It makes no difference really. But they will intercept it if they haven't already. So it could be an opportunity to get more physical evidence. And for completeness, let's see what is the real name of the owner of that house. Um, so I posted so I posted a post this morning, right? And in that post, I put a link to the booklet that Phil Denning gave me. And this is actually pretty cool. You can ask Gemini questions about the booklet, right? Who lives at 2218 Britton Ridge Drive, and in what page is it? See? So the real name, the name they have in the records is a Chinese name, right? But the real name is this. It's on page 4. Yes, here you see, right? It's the last house on page 4, and the real name is Chuck Bremholm, right? Of course, the house has been repurposed, and it's a rotation of Chinese people, right? And he's a real estate agent, right? Yeah, he's a white man, not Chinese. But the house. So if you go to Fort Bend County, see, so they put a Chinese name, right? Which would be consistent with what I'm seeing with my eyes, right? Because I'm seeing all these Chinese. It's a rotating door of Chinese agents, right? But this is what I was telling you, right? If you do a search for that name, see, there's you don't find anybody that looking at their professional profile could justify owning a house of $1.5 million. So to me, I don't know how much is that house, right? But it's over $1 million for sure, because the cheapest house is this one, and it's 1 million. But you see the profile of the other person that I just showed you, right? And this is a real estate agent, that obviously has decades of experience, right? Working experience here. And could be like it's more recent, right? That somebody that's been working on real estate for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, I don't know, could own a house that that costs $1.5 million or $2 million. Yeah. So how they convince them to give up the house, I don't know. That's the question that puzzles me. So anyhow, back to the topic, right? Of the tab. The tab is located here. So the Xfinity aggregator, right? So, and I already put a camera watching the tab, right? So either when they get in trouble and try to remove whatever they have in there, I will see it, right? Or if they, try to take it, I think they already took it, right? To be honest with you, and I'm not gonna tell here why, but I saw a couple of things that make me believe that they already took it. But when they get in trouble, when they get desperate, they will try to remove it, and then I will record them remove it. So either way, it's a win. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the new satellite connection that I installed, and I put the antenna more or less around here, so on the back of the house. And these let me see, and this is one example of those things that I sometimes say that even if you know what they're doing, by doing it yourself, you will see challenges that you could have not seen otherwise, and you will understand the technical decisions they've made. Right? So when I decided that I wanted to put another satellite antenna on this house, mirroring what I did at Valley-Side, the immediate question is, okay, where do I put the antenna, right? So I pick the place in a way that it minimizes the leakage of the signal, right? To make it more difficult for them to get it. And the other question is, to which satellite are you going to point? So I'm using Viasat, and from this point, there are 3 possible satellites, Viasat satellites, that I could point to, okay? And they're in different angles, right, of orientation, and different inclinations as well. So the azimuth and the inclination vary depending on the satellite. And this has different implications, right? But I understood, so I had to, the exercise I had to do was, okay, which of the 3 satellites I picked to make this more difficult for them, right? My goal is to make it as difficult as possible, right? So there were 3 options, right? So one satellite, I can't recall the angles right now, but I'm gonna give you an idea, right, of what the exercise looks like. So one satellite was pointing somewhere around here, right? The second option was pointing somewhere around here, right? Imagine that you trace a line from, I'm gonna put the pointer here. Oh, I cannot move the marker, but imagine that the marker is here, in this corner over here, okay? So if you trace an imaginary line from that point towards more or less here, that would more or less give you the angle of that satellite, okay? And the third option was pointing here, okay? So passing through this corner. So you see, the first option seemed to me like a very weak position, because they would pass a car driving it through Britton Ridge Drive, and they could isolate the signature, right? The same thing they're doing at Valley-Side on a Springfield Ridge Drive. So that makes it weak. The other option, which is this Chinese house here in the corner, It's also weak, more or less because of the same reason. The distance is too short, and they could pass a car on Westheimer Parkway and isolate the signal. This is more difficult because this street, it doesn't have many, they don't have any way to turn here except on this traffic light, right? So to time it is very difficult, right? Because they will have to wait for the light to be green so they can come driving on Westheimer, or they would have to stop here and wait until there are no cars and then turn right, and still to travel all this distance, it would take them, I don't know, say 10 seconds, 15 seconds, right? So it's very difficult to time it. So it's not weak, but it's not the best. Why? Because where is the house? Here. It's not the weak because it's not the best because you see it's almost perpendicular to Westheimer Parkway. It's not perpendicular, but almost, right? And that makes it weak because their technique is based in the best case, and I know this because I've been doing data collection, right? The best possible scenario is perfectly perpendicular to the target, right? And this is not perpendicular, but almost, right? And the other option is pointing it over here, which is kind of the same situation, right? I mean, if you prolong that line, that imaginary line that I'm telling you, right, it would hit Westheimer Parkway more or less around here, right? So they could still pass a car over here, but you see the distance is so vast from the antenna, right, that I think it's going to be very hard to isolate, right? And also, and this is where like knowledge is power, as TL Global says. These trees that they put on the church actually help, right? And I'm going to explain a little bit why. And why also these houses are useless basically for intercepting anything because of the trees that they put on the back. So you have to visualize the angle, right? So imagine that the satellite is on the sky. Imagine that the satellite is on the sky more or less above the N-store facility, right? Imagine that situation. Imagine that you're projecting above the N-store facility and the satellite is on the sky. And it's coming down with an angle, if I recall correctly, of 45 degrees, right? So what happens is that these trees are so tall that the 45, that they basically create like a shadow. And you can see the shadow. The shadow, actually, this is the sun, right? The shadow that you're seeing is the sun. The sun is, I don't know what time this picture was taken, but it seems like it was taken around noon by looking at the shadows angle, right? But you can see that, so that tells you that the tree is very tall. In fact, it's taller than the electricity poles, the utility poles, right? So what I'm saying is that the angle that the beam is coming down from the satellite basically hits the tree, and the tree is creating a shadow, like it's blocking the signal. And even if they pass the car on Westheimer Parkway with perfect timing, which is going to be very difficult for them to do, but even if they succeed, the quality of the signal is going to be terrible because of the trees, right? And the same applies to the houses, right? So all these houses that have these trees over here, that creates a shadow for the radio frequency signal that even if they put sensors in these backyards, they're going to be blocked by those trees. They would have to cut down the trees, right? So that's the direction I picked. Like, I think it's the strongest direction because the distance to the Westheimer Parkway road street is very large, and that makes the intersection ineffective. And also, all these trees create shadows that degrades the quality of the signal. And they cannot pass anything perpendicularly because they would have to create a new road. Like you see, like the antenna is basically pointing to the backyards of their houses, right? So they cannot drive a car at constant speed through those backyards, right? So this makes it really hard for them. But by doing this, I understood the role of those trees, right? That is exactly the role of those trees. And that's the reason why the uplink of the mini compound of Robert Mueller, which I think the uplink antenna is actually on this house. Where is it? Yes, it's this antenna over here, right? And I'm going to give you the coordinates, 29.75839. longitude minus 95.80697. So that's the antenna that I was saying, that they were moving trucks, they brought the moving trucks, moving things, but the antenna did not move, right? That's the antenna I'm talking about. That antenna is pointing on the same general direction as my antenna. I don't know if it's the same satellite. Probably not, right? Probably they're using, and this is something that I'm having my to-do list to develop, but I haven't had the chance to. My idea is, you know how they have this technology that, the agents walk with the phone in their hands, and they stabilize the image by software, and then with the sensors of the phone and the image, they figure out the exact location of the target, right? I want to do something like this, but for the antennas. Something that I can photograph an antenna, and the system by software, using the sensors of the phone and the image, can estimate which are viable satellites that antenna can be communicating to. Right? I'm yet to write the software, but I will write it. I think it's going to be an amazing tool. But anyhow, this antenna, which I believe could be the uplink of Robert Mueller's compound, is pointing in the same general direction. And so you see all these trees that they have on Westheimer Parkway, these trees are there to create this shadow effect, right? So if the FBI comes driving on here, they will not be able to catch anything coming down to that antenna, because those trees get on the way, right, get in the way. And you see, and after you understand this, if you look again at the map of Lake Pony States, you will understand other things. For example, if you look at Britton Ridge Drive, you will see that the houses on Britton Ridge Drive on the south side of the street are populated with heavy and tall trees, like my house, for example, right? Look how many trees it has, right? And all these houses, right, that are on the south side of the street. I believe this is to create this shadow effect, because all of their antennas on this side of Lake Pony States are communicating with satellites that are on this same general direction, right? So it's a way to create a shadow effect. So if the authorities come trying to intercept the downlink, these trees will degrade the signal because of where the antennas are pointing, right? And that's this, But if you look at this, and it's the same street, right? Like if you look at the other side of the street, there are no trees, basically, right? Like the houses on the opposite side of the street have clear line of view, clear line of sight to the south, right? Like, for example, here, there are no trees. See? This house has no trees, right? This house has no trees, right? This house, facing Britton Ridge Drive, has no trees, right? This house has no trees. So you see, it's the same neighborhood, the same HOA, the same builder, but the trees were deliberately put on one side of the street and not the other, right? Because that's where the shadow from the satellite is going to come from, right? The beam from the satellite is going to come from the south, right? So they need the shadow to take over, and they also want to give clear line of sight on the houses of the important people, so they can surveil what's going on, right? If they put all these trees in front of those houses, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the important people are, the most important people are obviously not on my side of the street. The most important people are the ones that don't have trees, right? Because those are the ones that are benefiting from the shadow of the other houses, right? So, it's one of those things that it's, I would have never seen this, right? If I had not gone through the process of having to think, how do I point my antenna to make this difficult for them, right? Which is the problem that they had to think about 25 years ago, when they were thinking, how do we put this setup in a way that makes it difficult for the FBI, right? It's amazing. But, I finally understood how to use the trees, right? And this, you cannot appreciate the size of the trees, but these are huge trees. Like when I bought the house, I was impressed of, I don't know, like I've never bought a tree, right? Like of this size, and say plant the tree here. But I imagine, like, if I wanted to buy a tree of this size right now, it would be very expensive, right? If I wanted to replace one of those trees, for example. But it's amazing that only one side of the street has the trees, and the other side of the street doesn't have the trees. Uh, so the trees are there for that reason, and that's the reason why these houses have these trees, right? To protect the uplink and the downlink, sorry, the downlink mostly of Robert Mueller, right? So that's the reason why these trees are here. So if anybody comes driving, or it's or walking, with like what they do this trick with the landscapers, right? The landscapers that have these motorized uh, grass cutting machines, right, where they get on top of the machine or like a tractor, right? You could also intercept signals as well, and they do this, right? Like this is one of the things that they do. But it wouldn't work in these backyards because the shadow, right? Like the signal quality gets degraded. So super, super interesting. Yes. So in the case of this antenna, that it's over here, I believe, right? What's protecting that antenna is these trees over here, right? That's why this thing has to have heavy population of trees, right? To create shadow over Westheimer Parkway on the critical zone where the interceptor will come driving. Right? But as always, right? Once you understand the mechanism, you can turn it into a signal of detection, right? And this is detectable via imagery because these trees are detectable. I can detect these trees with models, right? I can estimate the size of the tree by looking at the shadow, for example, and comparing it to the utility poles, for example. Right? So it's not difficult, and this, of course, leads to detection. So let's see. Yes. Yes. So I think I successfully went over this sea of observations. It took me almost 2 hours, but I did it. So yeah, so I think it's a good point to end this session. I hope this has given you a good insight into these data points. But I think again, like my goal here is to show the causality between me posting that video on March 27th, right? Let me show you the video again one more time, right? Of the black Tesla transmitting infrared signals to Joel Great house on March 27, 2025 at 8:18 p.m. and my son being taken from the home less than 12 hours later. And then resulting in all this, which again, right, like at the time, right, I thought it was an irrational decision because I couldn't understand. I mean, I couldn't see the link between the car and that action because the person living next door didn't seem like a high-profile identifiable person, right? But it was because they had changed already the registration names, as is shown in the booklet given to me by Phil Dent. But now that I know, I understand, right? I understand why they did what they did. But again, I think it was a mistake because now they open the liability and expose other people that I would have never discovered were involved, right? If they hadn't done this. Like I would have never met David Perwin, for example, right? Or Morgan Hyper, or the Adams Law Firm, or even maybe Andres Mendez, right? So I don't know. I think it was a mistake. But anyhow, I guess time will tell. So I'll close this session for now, and I'll see you on the next one.